Great. So we're live now, and we'll just wait a few moments to let our online viewers join us. But we have a fantastic in-person audience here at the Siena Art Institute. So thanks so much to everyone for joining our conversation tonight with Harrison David Rivers, who is not only our presenter this evening, but also our guest through the end of this semester here at the Siena Art Institute. So it's great to have him here, not only tonight, but also as part of our community for this time. So tonight's event, again, is taking place with our in-person audience, also online viewers, and we really welcome comments and questions during the second part of today's discussion. We'll save some time for some Q&A at the end. So for our online viewers, you're very much welcome to leave any questions or in the comment section, and we can take some time to respond to that. So it's very much an honor to introduce Harrison David Rivers, who is an award-winning playwright and a television writer as well, based in St. Paul, Minnesota. And he's a graduate of Kenyon College and the Columbia School of the Arts. His plays include The Bandaged Place, We Are Continuous, This Bitter Earth, Where Stars Are Born, When Last We Flew, and the musicals 5 Points with Douglas Lyons and Ethan Pachar, We Shall Someday with Ted Shen, and I Put a Spell on You with Nubia Garcia. Harrison has received numerous commissions, including from Roundabout, Yale Rep, Transport Group, Penrumba, and also the Theater Works in Hartford, my home state of Connecticut, and the Public Theater, amongst many others. His television credits include One of Us is Lying on Peacock, The Nevers on HBO, and The Plot on Hulu. Harrison sits on the board of directors of the Movement Theater Company and the Playwright Center. Venues for his theatrical productions have included the Playwright Center, Roundabout, the Williamstown Theater Festival, Java Theater Center, the New Conservatory Theater Center, New York Fringe, Diversionary Theater Lab, Real Arts, Out Front, Signature Theater, Theater Latida, and many more. So again, we very much welcome your questions and comments, and we'll save some time at the end for a Q&A. But without further ado, I will turn the stage over to Harrison. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you all for being here. There's maybe not have someone reading your bio while you're sitting right next to them. But thank you. You did a beautiful job. So I'm not really one for the spotlight, for spotlights of any kind, really. I'm more of a behind the scenes kind of guy, which is at least partially why I became a writer, to not have to stand or sit in front of people like I'm doing right now. But for tonight, I'll take a cue from Lady Macbeth and screw my courage to the sticking place in the hopes that something that I share tonight may inspire. So I thought I was going to be a performer. I was introduced to music quite early. My father required me and my brothers to play instruments, 2 each, piano and something else of our choosing, for discipline, not for artistry. He actually didn't care if we were any good at all. What he cared about was practice, because he believed that practice would build character and a strong work ethic. I chose the violin, and then later, when I realized that I was terrified of the E string, which is the highest string on the instrument, I switched to the viola. Playing in the orchestra led to singing in choirs, which led to musical theater, which led to theater, which I studied in college. During my senior year, I developed crippling stage fright in the middle of rehearsing my thesis project, a production of Edward Albee's The Play About the Baby. Picture me, quite a bit younger, with much bigger hair, weeping uncontrollably backstage before every entrance. It wasn't pretty. Somehow the show turned out okay, but afterwards I was at a loss because I thought I was going to be an actor, and now I had no idea. So I did what directionless young people fresh out of college have done for ages. I moved to a big city. In my case, it was San Francisco, one of my favorite places in the world. And while I was there, I started hearing voices in my head, voices that didn't seem to be my own. And it scared me. And I thought that maybe I'd snapped a tether. So I called my mom. And my mom is one of those people who you don't call unless you want to hear the truth, because she only tells the truth. And she tells it in a hard way. So I called my mother because I thought I wanted the truth. And she said, oh, and I said to her, I think this is what's going on and I think I might need some help. And she said, without skipping a beat, have you tried writing down what the voices are saying? And I hadn't, that hadn't even occurred to me. But after I hung up the phone, I did. I wrote down what the voices were saying, and those voices became my first full-length play, which I used to apply to grad schools, which led me to Columbia, and which many, many, many years later, I'm sure bolstered my resume for selection for this particular residency. So long story short, crippling stage fright led me to writing. Technically, I dabble in a number of types of writing. I write books for musicals and operas. I write for TV. I've written screenplays. I'm currently writing a podcast for Audible, but my first love has been, and will always be playwriting. I love writing for the stage. So that's what I'm going to chat with you about today. So I heard that some of you have been working on artistic statements. And so I thought, by way of further introduction, I would start by sharing my artistic statement with you. It's a two-parter. So part one, I write for the theater because theater is the most human thing I know. I write to assert my humanity in a country that tells me and others who look like me that our lives don't matter. I write to assert that my Black queer body and other Black queer bodies are worthy of narrative space. I write, as Toni Morrison says, to pull back the veil that has historically been drawn over proceedings too terrible to relate. I write, as Susan Laurie Parks says, to make history. I write, as August Wilson says, to tell the story. I write, in my own words, in hopes of ushering in a kinder, gentler, more equitable, more accepting, more courageous, more compassionate, more loving world. And part two, my plays are about broken, heartbroken, body-broken people who find strength in their imperfections. My plays are emphatic, empathetic, and poetic. They are sweet and sincere. My plays are punctuated by fragments, odd rhythms, inarticulateness, incomplete sentences, and monologue, quiet conversations, ringing phones, 10-minute-long voicemail messages, and direct address. In my plays, people sing, dance, fall in love, fuck, talk to the sky, remember when, shovel snow, jump rope in 5-inch heels, laugh so hard they cry, climb fire escapes, burn shit down, fly, and sometimes for no reason at all, it snows. So that was sort of an introduction to me and my work. I think the next question that follows logically is, but how does my artistic statement manifest in my work? When I was at Columbia, I watched as my Black, brown, and queer actor friends were resigned to bit parts, spear carrier to the left and royal maid number 4, relegated to secondary roles because our professors didn't know what to do with them. Somehow they couldn't see their talent beyond the color of their skin or their orientation. And I realized that if I didn't write for them, if I didn't write funny, dramatic, sexy, heartbreaking, nuanced roles for them, who would? How does my artistic statement manifest in my work? Well, first, it features Black, brown, and queer people almost exclusively. Though, and this is one of the things I'm most proud of, my work isn't about characters struggling with being Black, brown, or queer. Blackness and queerness are not problems in my plays. My characters are accepted, supported, and loved from jump. The conflicts in my plays come from life, from missed connections, from misunderstandings, from misuse, abuse, and the struggle to heal, to grow, and to change in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. My characters are just trying to figure shit out, like me. Representation is at the heart of what I do. I so rarely saw people who looked and loved like me on stage growing up, so I endeavor to be a part of changing that. Second, I have since the beginning of my career found that I am at my best artistically when I'm working with others. Most of my plays were written, as I mentioned before, with specific actors in mind for specific roles. A number of my plays have been commissioned by directors and/or theater companies who had a rough idea for a story, a prompt, or a theme, and asked me to flesh it out. So while I have technically written these plays alone, I've written them in deep collaboration with people I love and trust. So I thought what I would do is highlight 4 of my plays. An early collaboration with the Harlem-based theater company, The Movement, and my semi-autobiographical trilogy. So I'll sort of take us through a number of images, and we can sort of take those in. I'll point out a few things, and then we can do some Q&A, just to keep things tight and brief and open. So the first show, Look Upon Our Lowliness, as I said, produced by the Movement Theater Company in 2013. This was some of the early promotional art for the piece. This was drawn by my friend Byron. I think it's sort of lovely. This is a picture of the set with the full cast on stage. This particular piece, the description is as follows. When a young gay man is found dead in his New York apartment, his best friends are left wondering why. In 2013, I was living in New York City, and in early 2013, there was a considerable amount of violence being enacted toward gay men in the city, especially in Greenwich Village, in the West Village, sort of in lower Manhattan. And it was a really scary time. There was also a young man who was going to school in New Jersey who jumped off a bridge. Like there was all of this sort of tumult. There was all of this sort of fear. And so this play came out of conversations with a director friend of mine, David Mendizabal, about issues of sort of safety and friend groups and chosen family and religion and Brandy, the singer. And so I wrote this play. So this is the set, the fullness of the set. This is 2 of the characters enjoying sort of a moment of joy with fruit roll-ups early in the play. I don't know if you all know what fruit roll-ups are. They're sort of a delicious thing that I don't think are as popular anymore, mostly sugar. Another character, the play really focused on these relationships. In the first act, the men are all in their separate living spaces, and they spend a lot of their time talking to each other on the phone. And then they come together in the second half of the play, and they're all in the same space together. This is a toast in the second half of the play. You'll note largely men of color. Everyone in the cast was queer. The work, I think, the sort of aesthetic of my work, and this is largely, I think, having to do with my affiliation with David, my director friend, bold, colorful, patterned, really emphasizing moments of joy, song, celebration, while also sort of tempering that against sort of heavy, weightier themes. And then these are some photos of the cast. The play takes place largely in Harlem, and we also did the production in Harlem, which is sort of uptown in New York City. It's historically a Black neighborhood. And so we sort of took over this restaurant that we frequented all of the time, and they let us take some photos there. But this is the cast who also sort of all fell in love with each other while we were making the play. This is a promotional still from the show. You can sort of see some of the relationships here. The couple over here on the left, Tyler, who is the young man who passes away in the show, is at center, and sort of all of these men sort of around him. Moving on to This Bitter Earth, which is the first play in my trilogy. It was produced by New Conservatory Theater Center in 2017, and then it's had productions all over the United States and London since then. This piece, sort of a long synopsis, but at the Million Hoodie March in 2012, Jesse, a young Black man, encounters Neil, a young white man who has unwittingly found himself at the front of the crowd with a megaphone in his hand. Flash forward several weeks, and Jesse and Neil have begun dating. But as the months pass and Neil works his way further into the world of activism, Jesse never enters it. Over the years, Jesse and Neil negotiate the complex firsts of their relationship against a backdrop of political demonstrations and discord. With history unfolding around them every day, Jesse and Neil must contend with the fact that no matter their response to social turmoil, they cannot remain untouched by it. So I started writing this piece in 2012, around the time of the founding of Black Lives Matter. Another sort of moment of tumult, of disruption, of fear. And I was commissioned by a new conservatory theater to write a play about what it's like living in a Black body in the United States at this particular moment. And for me, that meant sort of focusing in on my own apathy toward protest. Everyone was marching, everyone was rallying, and I wasn't, and sort of examining why that was. Why didn't I feel compelled to be out there on the front lines? And so this play sort of digs into that in the context of this interracial relationship, where the white partner is actually the more activistic of the two. So here is some promo art from several productions. The one on the left was done in London. The one in the center was done at TheatreWorks Hartford in Connecticut. And the one on the right was at Penumbra in St. Paul, which is where I'm from. And then a couple of photos of this production. So these are from various productions. This one is from Chicago. This is Jesse and Neil in bed. This is from St. Paul. There's a scene of protest in the middle of the piece. And you'll notice the room is all white. And then all of these images were projected onto this all white set. This is a production from Richmond, Virginia. Note Neil's green hair, which I really love. There have been no other green-haired Neils in the multitudinous productions. This is from the Hartford production. My dear friend Ian is playing Neil here. This is back to Chicago, getting a sense of the full set. It was sort of a small underground space, and they really sort of figured out a way to give us all of the locations in one location. And this is a production in DC, actually. This is Jesse. I'm assuming this is the final monologue. This is one of the only productions of this show that I didn't see. It actually closed early due to COVID. So we had planned to go, but didn't get there in time. So this is the final image for This Bitter Earth. Moving on to We Are Continuous, which was produced by the Williamstown Theater Festival in 2022, so just this past summer. This was a commission from the Williamstown Theater Festival. They actually asked me to write something that scared me. And when I was having this conversation, I just found out that I was HIV positive. And so I decided to write a play about my relationship with my family and coming out to them as positive. So this piece is about a son and his mother and the son's husband. This is my husband right here, actually, in the front row. This is Christopher. And it's a monologue play. So each of the characters sort of tells parts of their story over the course of the evening. And by the end, all of those stories collide. So a few photos from that production. This is the promo art from Williamstown. We Are Continuous. This is the son character, played by my dear friend Leland. Again, my friend Ian, who I like to work with. As I mentioned earlier, I tend to write parts for specific actors. And if I don't write it for them, there are like a stable of actors who I love working with over and over and over again. So wherever I am, I'm sort of like, are you free? Might you want to do this other play of mine? And Ian is always game to come and play. And this is Brenda, who's playing my mother in the play. This is one of the first images in the play. And this is sort of the full set. So there were two separate rooms. One was the son's space, one was the mother's space. And then at the end of the show, which I don't have a photo of, these sort of carriages pull apart entirely, and we're left with this sort of empty space in the middle. The wall in the back goes completely white, and we get this silhouette of all three of them hugging at the end of the play, a kind of catharsis at the end of the play once they've all sort of told their truths, and there's a kind of acceptance, or the beginning of an acceptance. It's a hopeful play in the end. It's hard, but hopeful in the end. And then the last show that I will sort of show us some photos of is The Bandaged Place, which is actually at Roundabout Theater Company in New York City right now. I actually left right after opening to come here. But this piece is about an assault, and it's based on my own life. When I started school at Columbia, a week into my time at Columbia, I was stabbed by an ex-boyfriend. And in therapy, which I was required to go to in order to stay at Columbia, I started writing this play. I wasn't really able to talk about it, but I could write about it. So this play started as therapy, and then over time, sort of became its own thing. I started writing this play in 2009, and it took until this year for it to be staged, so 13 years. So this production is really special to me. This is a piece that is very, very close to my heart, and this is a cast of people who are near and dear to me. This is some of the promo art. We also got a really good review, or several really good reviews, which is nice. It's not essential, but it's nice. These are from rehearsal. This is Jardin, who plays the main character, Jonah. This is Jonah and his ex-boyfriend, Ruben, here. And then these are some stills from the production. Jonah and Sam, who is his daughter's ballet teacher or dance teacher, who he ends up sort of having a relationship with. This is Jonah's grandmother and his daughter, Ella. The play really leans into movement. Jonah is a dancer who, when he's assaulted, sort of doesn't have the same relationship to his body anymore. He feels sort of at ease putting pressure on his knee. And so the journey of the piece is really him moving from a space where he can't dance, can't move, to finally being able to sort of exorcise this demon of his ex-lover through dance. And every character gets sort of a dance moment. So this features Sam, the dance teacher, and Jonah's daughter in a dance class. And they do this sort of incredible hip hop routine near the top of the show. And it always gets applause, which is it's always sort of thrilling. And then I just threw in a couple of other photos of shows just to sort of see some of these similar themes, the sort of boldness of design, the sort of focus on intimacy. This is from a show called And She Would Stand Like This, which is a retelling of The Trojan Women by Euripides, set in a hospital in the sort of 90s at the late 80s, early 90s at the height of the AIDS crisis. And instead of the Trojan women sort of waiting around to figure out which man they're going to be sent home with, this is sort of a chosen family, a sort of Ball family waiting to hear the results of a diagnosis. So notice the bold design, the lights. You can't really see the costumes, but this idea of silhouette. This is one of the chorus members delivering a monologue here. Moving on, a production of Sweet, which was produced by National Black Theater in Harlem in 2016. This was a story about a love triangle between two sisters and the boy next door who comes back from college, and both sisters make a bit of a play for him and the ways in which those relationships shift and ultimately explode. This is actually a fun scene where George is delivering a monologue to his cow, which, sort of is up in the corner. What was funny is that cow sort of was not there and then flips down at the top of the monologue, which always got a bit of a chuckle. This is the youngest of the two sisters, Nina, and this is them playing cards. I love this photograph of them laughing and enjoying a moment together. And then this is sort of a lovely romantic moment. And the show is set in summer. And so the whole play is hot and they're always fanning themselves. They're always drinking tea and talking about ways to get cool. Another production, To Let Go and Fall, was produced in Minneapolis at Theater Latte Da, which does predominantly musicals and plays with music. So this piece I wrote about two men reuniting after many years of not speaking, and they have come together so that one of them can tell the other that he is HIV positive. And what was really beautiful about this piece is that we put a pool of water on stage, and the entire piece was scored. So there was music played under the entire piece by two cellists who played the music live. And I think I have some photos of that, but you'll notice the pool of water here, the reflection of the two men here. And the two men are represented at three different stages of their lives: when they're young men in school together, in dance school together, and then a few years later when they're sort of more grown, and then as older men. You can see the cellist sort of behind inside the water there. There's sort of a lovely moment where they decide to get drunk together. And this is what the set looked like, the stage with the pool of water, the cellos inside, and at the end it rained, which has always been sort of a dream of mine to have a play with rain. I will also say that at the end of Sweet, it snows, which was another dream of mine, to have snow come down from the sky. And that is the end of the presentation.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there are questions or thoughts or anything that anyone would like to talk about. Sorry, I sort of moved past the pretty screen.
Oh, that's fine. You can close the little X if you want, or we can just turn off the projector too if you finish the images. But thank you so much for sharing this glimpse into your work.
Sure.
It's just, I have so many questions myself, but maybe there's some questions though from the audience. Yes, in the back.
I wanted to ask you, when you write a play, you write also the scene exactly? So you give an idea to the stenographer what he or she will do without it?
Yeah, so I think of plays as blueprints, as sort of a roadmap to get somewhere. So I write the dialogue and I will include some stage directions. So sort of instructions for how characters might move. I might describe the room they're in or the space a little bit, but I actually love to let the director and the actors and the designers sort of dream big. So I put less on the page and trust my collaborators to sort of bring their brilliance to the project. Yeah.
It went beautifully with everything that you said to us, and it was amazing.
Oh, thank you. You know, I think the thing that I love about theater is the collaboration. And I think over time, I've just met a lot of people who I really love and trust. And I think they understand me, they understand the way that I write, they understand the worlds that I'm interested in. And so we don't have to even have long conversations about what should it look like, because they sort of take what they know about me and they take what they understand about the play and then are sort of free to experiment. The results have been good so far. Yeah.
You mentioned sincerity as one of your mission statements. I was wondering what exactly that meant to you. Like, is that physical detail? Is it in willingness to talk about taboo subjects or emotional closeness to your own life? Or if you sit down and you say, I'm going to tell something that's honest and sincere, where does your head go?
Yeah, so I feel like I'm always challenging myself to tell the truth. And I think there are gradations of truth. You know, I think there's like levels. So, you know, if truth is on a 1 to 10 scale, I think I often start off with, and if 1 is like the closest to me, like the thing that really hurts or the thing that could hurt other people, possibly, I think draft 1 is always like a 10. You know, like it's true, but it's far away. It's safe. It's easier, it's palatable. And I think in the rewriting process, in the workshop process, when other people come into the collaboration and they start to ask questions, I think I challenge myself to then move to a 9, move to an 8, move to a 3. I think the plays that I showed today are like, not all of them are 1s, certainly. Some of them are more 1s than others. Some of them are 8s because of the nature of the storytelling. I think the plays that are really close to me, the Bandaged Place, for example, We Are Continuous is like a negative 30 probably. It was pretty. It was a hard play to write, and it was a hard play to rehearse, and it was a hard play to watch. But also, there was so much joy in that difficulty. So I think an audience can tell when you're telling the truth. I think there is something about witnessing something that feels real and close and genuine. I think that's special. And I know as an audience member, I always like when I can watch something and go, oh my goodness, like that's not a lie. Like that's not fabricated. That's not, there is a real truth in that with a capital T. I just think that feels like a real lifeline. That feels like an offering. That feels like a gift. And so I guess I'd like to give as many gifts in my work as possible, which is sometimes awkward for me and sometimes awkward for my husband when he's featured in plays. Not him, but like, fabrications of him. It's certainly probably awkward for members of my family who have been featured in my plays. But I do think that there's something really special about knowing that the author is in direct conversation and openness with you as an audience member. Sorry, that was a much too long of an answer to a beautiful question.
We've had some nice comments coming in from our online viewers. One natural elements in your plays with rain or water, if they're meant to have a purifying connotation?
I do think in all of the plays where there is a natural element, I think that's true. I also have a recurring tornado theme. I'm from Kansas originally, so tornadoes crop up a lot, like wind crops up a lot. There's a lot of destruction in my plays in sort of like, I have reached a boiling point and now I am going to explode. And so like everything in the room gets destroyed or everything in the space gets destroyed. And then we are left with the pieces and we either put them back together or we sort of just move on from it. So I think there's purification there. I think there's sort of like the destruction of all of the excess, all the extra, all of the unnecessary, and or the destruction of everything that I thought was true that isn't actually true, or the chains that were holding, like all of those sort of, I don't know, all of those sorts of things I think are operating, but definitely weather and natural elements I think are about clearing away and purifying and cleansing and allowing people to then move forward with a kind of newness or into something new. It's a great question.
Oh, that's really interesting. Here we had a former resident artist, a painter, Angie Dufresne, who also is from Kansas originally, and I think for her also the ever-present possibility of tornadoes entered into her work as well. So it's really interesting to hear about that. But there's some other questions. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
In response to one thing you were saying when you mentioned Colombia, I teach writing here, and I have to say, I was kind of, in some way, part of your being here, because I'm on the selection committee.
Thank you. Please don't tell me if you regret your decision at this moment. You can send me an email.
To tell you the truth, I mean, however impressive Colombia is, that wasn't, speaking for myself, that wasn't what excited me.
Good. Good. I'm glad.
I absolutely fell in love with just the quality of your work. It's exceptional.
Thank you.
I just admire the hell out of your work. Really, and I remember making the comment that you seem to, your language does, you have the power to make your language say exactly what it wants to, what you want it to.
Thank you.
And my question is, how much work does it take? I mean, you're writing as we got a sample of it in your statement. It's like a well-composed piece of music. Maybe your father was right about the discipline. How different are your first drafts from your final drafts? How much rewriting? How natural is that mastery over language?
So I hate first drafts. I find them very painful. They come out, every play is different. Some plays come out very quickly. So like when I think about things for a long time before I write them. So sometimes I've thought about it for 6 months and then like I write it in 2 days or I write it in a week, which means then the draft is really raw. It's really unfinished. It's sketchy. It's sort of like I hint at this and I hint at that, knowing that I have time to fill it in later. And then on the flip side, there are some things that come out pretty fully formed. Like they end up, like the first draft looks a lot like the 18th draft. I might have just changed like some of the stage directions or the composition of lines or, so it really varies. I could say like for the Bandaged Place, for example, which I started in 2009, that came out during therapy. So pretty quickly as a means for me not to have to talk about this thing that had happened to me. And it was very, very close to me. So actually on a scale from 1 to 10, it came out like a 2. And then the process of the next 13 years was taking it to an 8 or 9. Because like actually the piece was not served, the story was not served well by it being so close to me that like it was like absolutely excruciating to work on. So it actually required fictionalization. I will say that the changes in the last year have been very small, like surgical almost, like the removal of a word or a comma or the removal of a phrase, like tiny, tiny, tiny things that like don't seem to make any difference at all, but actually in production, are the difference between something being slightly clunky and smooth, or something landing like, you know, with a Simone Biles sort of like full give her 10s across the board, and like getting a 9.8. I don't see my plays, I hear my plays. So a lot of the work that I do is also about rhythm and about like, how do the words come out of people's mouths? Do they trip on them? If they trip, then they're the wrong words. And different actors handle that language differently. So all of my work is tailored to the actor who's performing them. So if like a phrase is amazing and I love it and I really don't want to change it, I will insist that the actor try it. And if they can't get it, then we have to find another way for them to say it. And that's part of that collaboration too. I think my work definitely deepens with active participation from a group of people. So I really can't take full credit for anything good on the page because I really rely on folks to interpret and to question and to argue and to interpret. And I actually like, I love that part of it. The like, oh, that doesn't work. Like, what do you think might work better here? Next time we go through it, try it. Let's see how that goes. And really leaning into that sort of back and forth, the sort of like, make it up, try something, and then I'll make it better, you know? But yeah, so it really depends on the project. Yeah, it really depends on the project.
You said theater is the most human thing you know. Why?
Yeah, you know, I think for me, it's because we're all in the space together, that there are people on stage, living, breathing people, inhabiting, living, breathing people, giving to, in the audience, living, breathing people. And we're all sort of experiencing each other in that space. Like I'm experiencing the story being told to me, but I'm also experiencing my neighbor experiencing the story being told to them. And that then impacts the way that I experience the story being told to me. And that thing that we're all like breathing together or weeping together or laughing together, like that sort of togetherness and the sort of the presentness of that feels really special. I think for me, like going to the theater is a lot like going to church or to a service. There's a spiritual experience there for me, a sort of heightenedness and aliveness. The hairs on my arms stand up. It's transformative, and the fact that I'm transforming in the presence of other living, breathing humans just feels good and right and elemental to me. I'm sure people could find that other places, but I go to the theater. Yeah.
I need to find a way to work this, but I'm kind of curious. Should I start with great word? I'm curious about how are you related to your characters, or like where do they come from? Because I don't know anything about playwriting, but I like from like writing fiction or whatever. I guess a lot of people do is either to take a part of themselves in there, like what would I have acted in that same situation if I were the character, or like if I were, or people base them on like people they know in real life, or like, friends and family. And based on like your earlier presentation, I would assume that you have a somewhat like close and personal relationship to your characters.
I do.
And often I feel like in the first few plays that you were bringing up, they always have like a bed or like a bedroom, which I'm assuming usually has a foundation for people to relax and be vulnerable, be honest. Whereas there's some like intimacy in there. I think that was very interesting.
Yeah.
So about the characters.
I mean, I'm very close to my characters. Many of them are modeled on either experiences that I've had, or questions that I have, or debates that I'm having internally that I need a way to work through or logic out. And so I write the play to figure out, how do I really feel about that? Or what do I think the answer is to that question? Or was there a better way for me to have dealt with X situation? Let's play it out this way. Let's play it out that way. I also feel like a thing that I'm really interested in is intimacy. And so, I mean, yes, there are always beds. There are almost always kitchens too. There's almost always cooking or eating. There's almost always movement or dance, sweat. Like I love it when people work and then are sort of disgusting in the context of like real life. I mean, you go through the day and you sweat, and then by the end of the day, you're like, oh God, like I'm disgusting. Like I love that. Like that feels real to me. And people sharing that with each other feels real. So intimacy is important. And I feel like I'm always asking questions of intimacy in my life, and those things tend to end up on stage. I think there's good in that, and there's also probably bad in that, like I've spent a lot of time thinking about myself, and maybe there's something selfish about that, or maybe it's specific enough that it becomes universal, and so people can see themselves in my exploration of me. I hope that's what it is, and not that people just think that I think I'm so important, because it isn't actually that. It's just that I think we're all asking questions about who we are and how we fit in and where should I go and what should I do. And my way of sort of reasoning through that or thinking through that is to put it on but I call them things not my name. Like I call them Jesse and Jonah, and they give them other names, so they're not me, but they're admittedly close.
I think the idea of the sincerity that comes from the self, so I think it's very, as you say, very interconnected as well. So it's there was a lovely comment that came in from Lily, who was saying on our YouTube channel that your work is so full of joy, very deep thinking, bringing us into important realities of others. And I couldn't say it better myself. I think as you...
It's very sweet, Lily. Thank you.
The idea that you... I mean, there's so many ideas that we could talk for hours about, the idea of safety and joy amidst tumult and discord and fear. I think also the idea of the relationship to our bodies. I hope I'll have the chance someday to see the Bandaged Place, because think that the idea of the relationship to our bodies is sounds very compelling, but I haven't had the chance to
Sure.
see it. It's amazing. It just opened right before you
Yeah,
came here to
yeah.
Siena. So, and in general, how have you found Siena during your explorations here? I'm just curious if you've overheard conversations or different movements through this city or other things that have caught your interest here.
And I think the thing that I love two things. The first is this isn't necessarily just about Siena, but I love the time difference. I love being 7 hours ahead of everyone at home, mostly because it gives me time to sort of think and reflect and work before people are asking me for things, which is like, it's a purely selfish thing, but I love sort of being ahead in time. Siena is quite intimate and quiet, and there's something peaceful, or at least my experience of it thus far has been peaceful. And I feel like my life hasn't had a lot of peace for a while, just because I've been sort of writing and in rehearsal and in production, and people are reviewing things and telling me what they think about my work, and some of it's nice and some of it's not so nice. And so there's just been a lot of demand. So to be here 7 hours ahead of demand in a place that feels sort of peaceful and quiet and has been really lovely. I feel like I have experienced a kind of rest here in the week that I've been here that has been, and not like sleep rest, but just sort of like, I don't have to work as hard, which actually I think makes the work better. So that's been really, really wonderful. And it's beautiful.
Well, it's been wonderful to have you here, not only this evening as our presenter, but it's also great to have you here for this whole residency. So, so we'll have you here through the end of next week when our semester concludes. And thank you all so much for our audience and our viewers as well. Just before we sign off, just a few notes about some things coming up in our schedule. We have this Saturday our end of semester exhibition where we'll have artworks and creative writing pieces from our international artists here, as well as a musical performance by the Siena Choir and other community projects that are connected to our regional initiatives exploring conflict resolution and marginalized communities. So we have a lot of things to share with you all on Saturday. So for our audience viewing, you're very much welcome to join us here at the Siena Art Institute from 4 to 6 p.m. this coming Saturday, December 3rd. Next Tuesday, I myself will have a personal exhibition at the Physiocritici Museum here in Siena. And then the following Tuesday, we'll have another Tuesday talk with the musicologist Leo Borchi. So we hope our local audience can also join us for that musical event coming up. So without further ado, our in-person audience can enjoy further conversation and snacks as well. But we'll sign off with our online viewers. Thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you, Harris, and above all.
Thank you.